Welcome back to the Industrial Transformation Podcast. This is Jeremy Frank, CEO of KCF Technologies, and I am absolutely thrilled to have with me a colleague and really a friend, Buddy Petersen, who is a well-known person and the Chief Operating Officer of FTS International, which is a leading provider of oil field services in upstream oil and gas. So I'll say welcome, Buddy Petersen.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here.
For those that don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself personally and your career trajectory and what's landed you in the role that you're in?
Wow, that goes back quite a few years. The truth is, I grew up in the West, a small oil and gas town, Farmington, New Mexico, the San Juan Basin, kind of the humble beginnings. My dad was a pastor, my mom was a school teacher, and everybody that we knew was either in the oil field or they were in the oil field. So those are really the only two choices, which is kind of funny. We all kind of giggle about it. The ultimate goal was to either be, work for one of the three service companies, Halliburton, Schlumberger, or BJ, or to work for an oil company. And at the time, there were a few that people don't even remember anymore. There was Tenneco and Unocal and some of the others. And so upon graduation from high school, I went ahead and didn't go to college. I went right into working in the oil field, decided that wasn't that much fun. So I went to college. Short story longer, several years, a couple of decades later, I found myself with a degree in civil engineering and on the front doorsteps of working at Halliburton. And Halliburton, when I went in for the interview, said, well, look, plan on, you'll be moving about every 8.5 to 9 months. And 7.5 years later, I was still at the same duty station with several promotions. But I found myself moving through the organization in one individual place, which kind of gave me a unique perspective of really understanding a lot about one individual area and building a pretty close-knit team over time. Halliburton treated me better than in every facet of my career, both all of the product lines as well as operations, engineering, sales, and they gave me an opportunity to transfer after about 7 years, the first part of my career, to go to Western Oklahoma. And over the course of the next several years, again, we learned a whole lot more about 24-hour operations, about hyperutilization, about some of the things that we'll talk about probably later in this podcast that really got me to where I am today, unbeknownst to those that were doing it. We were all just trying to make a living, trying to find out what was best for the customer. In about 2007, I had an opportunity to leave Halliburton and kind of venture out with a private equity group to kind of go out on my own to look at the world through a different lens and try to. I took a chance. My bride actually encouraged me to leave the mothership, and we left and went on this crazy adventure that took us through parts of Texas, parts of Kansas, a sale of a company, a startup of another company, some road rash, some private equity burns, some getting skinned up, building a few teams, and then through all of that, over the course, I was invited to come interview at the FTS organization because they were planning on doing a turnaround or a change. The guy that invited me was gracious enough to think that I had a chance at doing it. And lo and behold, 5 years ago, we agreed to come to work at FTS, and here we are. Here we sit today.
Yeah, here we are. That's great. I appreciate that history of what put you here. Can you tell us just a little bit about FTS and what you've been doing for the last 5 years?
Well, sure. FTS was, I've had the unique pleasure of standing on the shoulders of giants. When I came to work in this organization in 2015, it had already somewhat matured. It was started by two brothers, the Wilkes brothers, who currently own another frac company. But the Wilkes had formed the organization early on. They believed very, very strongly that vertical integration gave them a unique position inside the market, as well as an opportunity to grow their business. They sold the business to a group led by Tomasic in about 2011. So by the time I joined in 2015, they had retired for 5 years, so to speak. But during the course of the time and during the buildup, they built all of the frac fleets that we currently have today and put together a vertically integrated manufacturing center, a machine shop, CNC machines, a couple of robots, a bunch of other parts and pieces of this business that most people don't have the unique pleasure of getting to oversee or even participate in. And so that's kind of the brief history of where they were and where they are. And so what we've done since 2015 is really we've streamlined the organization. We've taken a look at, does the vertical integration process still make sense? We've whittled some of that down. We've cleaned the organization up, both from an SG&A perspective, closed and consolidated some businesses, some locations that didn't make sense. But really, all in all, we've been hyper focused on this utilization piece. And kind of on the loose terms, in 2015, just kind of as a data point, we used to average pumping about 10 and a half to 12 hours a day on a good day, 4.5 stages a day. And currently today, we're pumping somewhere in the range between 17 to 21 hours a day. And that's pumping hours in a 24-hour period. So you can see that the efficiencies have changed tremendously since 2015 to 2020.
How different would you say is that common across the entire industry, or is that something that's unique to FTS, or a little bit of both?
It's a combination of both. I think, Jeremy, I would like to stand up and beat my chest and say it's all about what we've done and how hard we've pushed and all the great things that KCF has helped us along the way. But I think that would be a little one-sided. I mean, the beautiful part about our industry is because of the ups and downs and the massive swings that we have, both from a commodity price, from our Exxon and our XTO and some of the other customers that we have. We are forced to be better, faster, stronger. And therefore, because of that, all the service companies have had to move in that direction. But the reality of our efficiencies are a combination of what we've done, what we've put in place, the hard work that our men and women in the field do every day, as well as our customers requiring that to be able to provide, oil and gas for America.
Yeah, I'm doing the math quickly. For anybody that's listening and is trying to do the same math I am, if there's only 24 hours in a day. If you go from 12 to 21 hours of active, productive operational time, unless I'm doing the math wrong, I mean that's eliminating 75% of the non-productive time that in a pretty short amount of time. I mean that's a pretty remarkable achievement, I would say.
Absolutely. One of the other things that we're super proud of as well is that you talk about that non-productive time, even in that 12-hour period of pumping in the early parts of 2015, the job design itself, in terms of the total hours or minutes of what the customer asks us to do on a per stage basis, hasn't changed but 5% over that time. So it's still roughly 2 hours of pumping. And how many times can you repeat and manufacture and redo that on location with limited amount of NPT? And that's what we're really the most proud of. Yeah. Because if you think about what that says is, we not only have we eliminated 75% of the NPT, but we've also increased the speed and the rate in which those companies can deliver oil and gas to America.
It really is quite a remarkable accomplishment. You can slice and dice it any different way, but that's a great way to just summarize it. So I think a lot of people will have a hard time accepting that that's possible, and that's just one of the reasons I'm so interested to talk through some of this with you and just capture some of the stories from your perspective.
Well, I mean, let me be the first one to say, right? I mean, when I stand back, when we started, my achieved goal when I came to work in 2015, based on my Halliburton training, based on my engineering background, what I thought was absolutely possible was to go from 12 hours a day, or, said a different way, to go from 4 stages a day, probably into the 6-stage range on a per day basis. I mean, that was my stated long-term goal, which would have been 2017, 2018 timeframe. So there wasn't anybody that was believing that it was possible up to and including this guy.
Wow.
But here we are. So,
and in terms of stages, if you do that apples to apples, instead of going from 4 to 6, you went from 4 to what?
We're averaging about 12 today.
Wow. Triple. Yeah, it's remarkable. What would you say is the reason? So basically, you've done things that you didn't even think your whole organization didn't think were possible. Just for good reason. You've got a long career. You've been with Halliburton. You've gotten used to basically what's possible and what's not possible. And then you have kind of the whole paradigm of what's possible gets changed. Like, what is it? What are the big reasons why that happened?
Oh, I think it's a pretty easy one. We've got great people in the field, so let's just start there. When I said we had the opportunity to build on the backs of giants, I mean, it was very, very true. The organization itself was, because our equipment is all homogeneous, it's all the same. Everybody knows how to run it. Everybody knows how to operate it. There's not a lot of differences between software, hardware, platforms, any of that. So it made the workforce kind of plug and play in all the different basins across North America. So let's take that as the first piece that was a huge advantage that you don't have even at a Halliburton or any of the other big companies. The second piece is anytime you come in an opportunity where there's a big management change or there's an opportunity to do it different, and your boss, my boss, Michael Doss, was appointed the CEO. And Michael's philosophy at the beginning was, it's okay, let's break a few eggs. Let's try things that no one has ever tried. Let's do things that no one has ever done, because we really don't have anything to lose in the world to gain. And so when you have that kind of confidence above you and you have such great men and women below you, it just provides an opportunity in an environment that allows you to try anything. And let's be quite honest and candid. We did. I mean, the motto around here is, look, we'll try anything once. Most of the time we'll try it twice. And if it doesn't work, maybe we'll twist it a little bit and try it again. And then on top of all of that, I'd mentioned earlier about our manufacturing capabilities here. Some of the things that we were able to do that some of the others can't is, if you wanted to make a design change in one part of our equipment, we could not run it up the flagpole, but run it right to the manufacturing facility, put your arm around the guy in the CAD machine, draw it up, talk about it, run it back through the CNC machines, get it out, paint it, and put it in the field within 24 to 48 hours and try it. And so the speed at which we had the opportunity to change things and try things was unheard of. And that also did nothing more than just fuel the flames and fan the flames of all of our men and women that were coming up with ideas and ways to do things and trying something new. And we were just uninhibited, I guess, is probably the best way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that from my perspective. Our whole company has been interfacing with that, and that definitely, those are the ingredients. I mean, so you've got the people that are willing, you've got the organizational appetite for change, and then you've got the vertical capacity to actually make those changes happen without a lot of bureaucracy. It's a pretty unique set of ingredients. Let's go back. So, for the listener, take me back to your first introduction to my company, to KCF, kind of your impressions, what was going on for you at the time, what was going on for the company at the time, and how that got started.
What a great story. And look, I love to tell this story, so I hope that the audience can actually feel how excited I am to tell this story, because it's one of my favorites. So, in the version of a great storyteller, everybody just kind of buckle up and sit down and just kind of try to envision what this feels like. So we've just gone through this huge management change inside an organization. We've gone from roughly 4,000 people. We've had a massive layoff restructure. We're down to, somewhere in the 2,500 to 3,000 range. We've eliminated all of the bureaucracy, all of, 2/3 of the IT department, all of these gigantic, massive changes that are going on. We're working across North America. We've got a few crews working in the Northeast. One of the customers that we're working for is Equitable, or EQT. Very, very large customer, been very, very good to us relative to, keeping our equipment busy. I get a phone call from one of my sales reps in the Northeast and says, look, we're going to have a meeting with EQT. And we're going to talk with their technology team. And we think it's paramount that you be here, because we're going to introduce and I can't even remember the very first thing that they said. They didn't say, all I really heard was maybe noise canceling headphones or some sort of transistors or some sort of technology that I had never heard of before, nor was I very interested in at the time. So again, everybody bear with me. Imagine this. We fly into Pittsburgh. We get picked up at the airport. We drive downtown. EQT's in a big giant building in downtown Pittsburgh. Very, very ominous, very formal. We go into this meeting and we walk into this boardroom, and there's multiple floors and multiple boardrooms, and in sits a couple of people that you can tell just by the look at them that they are very much into technology. And there's 4 or 5 other young people in there. And of course I stroll in and I have my operations manager from North America. And lo and behold, They explain that we're going to go ahead and talk about this KCF technology, what we're going to wind up doing. We're going to put some sensors, and we're going to be able to help you predict and optimize, and help you on the safety aspects of your business. 3 minutes later, they started going through a set of slides, and it dawned on me, almost as if you'd hit me in the forehead with a hammer, that there's an application and an opportunity not just for EQT, but across my entire organization. So this is really the only time in my adult career that I've ever walked into a place that I didn't want to be, to hear a story that I didn't want to hear, to turn right around and have my whole world get changed upside down, because the reality was this was something that could transform not just my company, but it could transform the entire industry.
I wasn't actually there that day. What exactly did you see? Like, connect the dots for those, because there's so many companies that are trying to do what you did, and this was 5 years ago. Like, what did you see exactly?
So the story is really simple. One of the things that we all face, anybody that's in any kind of organization that either provides a service or manufactures anything, anybody that has any humans that work for you or around you, we all face the same situations. One is, how do we motivate our employees to do the right thing all the time without having to micromanage them? How do we provide them with data and tools and feedback that they can manage themselves? And how do we have something that's as simple, that isn't complicated, cumbersome, or super expensive, that would give feedback almost immediately and predict even before? And that's exactly what was shown on the scoreboard. The scoreboard was, here's a product that you could put on your piece of equipment that could anticipate and could tell you something long before the human ear could hear it, or before it would fail. And it was direct, it was simple, it was, super techie, I suppose, if you looked at it that way. But I looked at it through the lens of an opportunity to provide management feedback for the guys and gals on location that were doing it in the middle of the night, on the weekends, across every shift. That's what I saw.
It's that feedback. I mean, so that's what's so special. I mean, just so from my point of view, let me go back a couple of years. This convergence, the reason that EQT meeting happened goes back about 3 years prior. Penn State University, because we're kind of in the middle of the Marcellus Shale, which was the big, hot topic at that time. They were funding, technology, or not so much funding technology, but they had 3 different centers focused on different aspects of how to kind of bring innovation to the oil field. And I had been in Pittsburgh probably 3 years prior to that meeting, in the same area in South Point, presenting at this innovation contest. And I had no clue about oil and gas or anything related to it. And the one gentleman from EQT, David Ross, he was one of the judges in this contest. So they did a real good job of engaging industry leaders. That led to us doing, we actually did a fielded test, a pilot with FTS in 2013. So 2 years prior, we got sensors out on a pump truck and had them out in the field. And I went down, I put on a pair of fire retardant coveralls. I didn't even know what that was. There's probably a picture of me somewhere wearing FTS coveralls that day. Anyway, we got that out. We did a test. It worked. And then nothing happened for like 2 years. And this is prior to you being there. But here's what's remarkable is, I think what you saw, you weren't the first one to see it. People get excited about industrial IoT and Industry 4.0. And I always like to remember that, there were wireless sensors effectively on the Apollo moon missions. There's nothing that new about the technology, and yet this whole wave of technology and how it can impact industry, people have been talking about it since the early 2000s. I mean, we've been funded to do it by the DOE for the first time in 2004, and yet 11 years later, most companies were still having a really hard time about how to operationalize it. And then you look at just a couple of graphs, and you were able to see how to operationalize that and impact the people. So I want to ask you, and the people is so key, because that's what we've seen everywhere. So many of these projects don't play out the way that the technologists think they're going to. And it often comes back to winning over the hearts and minds. So when you say that it's simple, and when you say that you have the data and the tools that people can actually work with, and that you can use it to motivate people, you were seeing things that weren't actually there yet in 2015. So what is it about you, or what is it about FTS, this readiness, kind of this threefold readiness? when you reflect on it, why do you think that you were able to connect those dots so quickly?
Well, I again would tell you that it's three parts. I mean, the first piece is no one ever dons on a pair of coveralls and comes to work in the oil and gas services and says, look, I want to work harder, make less, and disappoint my customer. So I think if you go from that baseline that says every employee that works for us in general, they want to do a good job. And just like anybody else, they don't want to work and not get any kind of recognition. They want to do things the right way. I mean, there are some that want to do shortcuts, and we'll get into some of that later. And another part of the business that's so hard to work through, it's just the fact that it takes people a lot longer to get engaged and get comfortable. So what I will tell you is the first part is everybody really wants to do a good job. So that's the first piece. The second piece, it was as if the slides on the wall were nothing more than a big chief tablet and a big bright flashlight that just shined and said, look, the questions that we all ask and the questions that we all want to know the answers to have always been there. We just haven't been able to find a way to put a light on it and to see it. And that's what this did. And so I will tell you, it's the people wanting to do a good job. It's the light or the availability to look at the process or look at the problem through this flashlight that we call KCF. And then the third piece is because our organization was so flat, we had eliminated all of the layers of management. And anytime that you have the layers of management, you build a bureaucracy. We all know that you have, someone has to get approval or buy-in from his direct report. And then you've got someone who's got a matrix report. And then you've got someone who's got a matrix report to that report, and someone else who has to fund it, and someone else who has to agree to it. And we were in a unique position that I was fortunate enough to be the COO, and there was only two people in line between myself and the pump truck on location, and that happened to be the guy that was with me in the meeting, Jamie Peace, and the district manager in between. And that's all there is, and that's all there was. And so our ability to transform the organization from one day to the next happened because there's really, the distance between the location and the corporate office, or the distance between the wellhead and the checkbook, was super, super small.
Yeah, it's just it's very timely convergence of ingredients. And I mean, I don't even know if you appreciate how remarkable it is. I mean, I know you understand what's remarkable about what FTS has achieved in those aspects, but one of a number that gets quoted a lot these days is that 92% of all Industry 4.0 like IIoT projects and implementations fail to achieve the ideal, fail to achieve game-changing results. And I mean, so let's talk about your results. If we talk about it like the impact to the company or and by the way, that 92%, that's now. I mean, you're talking about 5 years ago, 2016. I'm saying now, most companies, when companies study this, the vast majority of these implementations are having, modest impacts, if any. Tell us about your experience. Like, what was the impact or the return on investment? Yeah.
I don't know. Let's break it down. Let's break it down to bite-sized bits so people can really appreciate really kind of the simplicity of how it all worked. Because one of the things that maybe wrapped up in that 92% is we have a lot of people that get way out over their skis as far as the technology goes and what they can achieve and what they can't achieve and some of those other things. So let me break it down into a bite-sized kind of a morsel, kind of the way I think about the business and the way I thought about the business at the very time that I got to watch these slides show up in EQT's office. So the majority of our equipment that we have on location is made up of 20 pump trucks. We'll just use that as a nice round number. And on the back of each of those 20 pump trucks is a fluid end. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit more later about what that fluid end is. But for all intents and purposes, just imagine it's a block of steel or stainless steel or carbon steel or some other type that's roughly 62 inches long by about 29 or 30 inches deep by about 40 inches tall. And inside that, it's been bored, a couple of different directions. And that piece of equipment is 75% of all the maintenance costs inside our organization are tied and related to that piece of equipment that we call a fluid end.
And let me just interject, Buddy, for those that don't know upstream oil and gas, the pump truck is a tractor trailer and on the trailer is this pump. The fluid end is the pump, but it's got an engine. It's got a 2,500 horsepower engine driving this pump. So it's huge horsepower with 20 of these things lined up in concert. Just for some context.
Yes, thank you. And so of those 20, those fluid ends, like I said, 75% of the R&M cost, repair and maintenance cost of any individual location is tied up directly into those fluid ends. And at the beginning of this process, those fluid ends lasted, their usable life was roughly somewhere between 450 to 525 pumping hours. And so when we start thinking about this transformation process, our goal was to double the life of those fluid ends, to go from 500 hours to 1,000 hours. Now, context-wise, those fluid ends, if you bought one from an OEM today or an OEM at the time, were roughly $49,000. And the cost to have all of KCF sensors on every piece of equipment on location on a monthly rental was less than half of just one of those fluid ends. So the magnitude of savings early on, if you only could preserve and only could gain double the hours or double the life expectancy of 1/20th of those on location, it would more than pay for the cost of having all of the technology present. And so that was the stated goal. That was how we were going to go ahead and measure. And as long as we passed that hurdle, the math was easy. There was so much more than that. And as it's turned out, obviously 5 years later, we've moved the goalposts a couple of different times in order to continue to improve. And we've seen so many other benefits, but at the very beginning, the humble beginnings, the 92% or why we were successful and those that weren't, were really based on that simple math.
Got it. How would you say, I mean, how do you quantify it? So you were at 450 to 525 in terms of pump life, fluid end life. Where are you today? Like how long did it take you to achieve, a meaningful, dramatic improvement?
Well, I mean, dramatic improvement was almost, I'll tell you, we started in Shreveport in the Haynesville, which is a super high pressure area. And we were able to achieve results. I don't think we had one single month that we didn't ultimately save enough to offset and pay for the KCF products. So I will tell you that the response was almost immediate. We'll call it 2 months. And what I will tell you today is the life expectancy. Not only have we achieved doubling that, but now we're twice that. So over the course of 5 years, we've gone from 450, 500 hours to somewhere 1,590 to 1,600. Some much longer than that.
I mean, when I talk with people in other industries about that, people have a hard time believing it or understanding it. That much improvement is possible if you run your equipment optimally and your people actually take it seriously. But it's it's true. It's wild.
I think people struggle with the belief. One because it's the simplest things that we somehow don't believe. I mean, you've heard me say it before that I think we could have achieved a tremendous amount of improvement if I would have hired 3 or 4 extra guys that were able to do nothing more, or gals that were able to do nothing more than stand on the back of a pump truck with a flashlight and identify these problems. However, in order to hire those people and to give them a flashlight to let them stand, I would have put them in harm's way in a zone in which they couldn't be because the loss of life or limb was too great. And so once you kind of take a step back and look at the simplicity piece, it's just hard for people to believe that you can achieve that much on something that's as simple as people actually doing the right thing.
Let's talk about that. So you're kind of touching on the safety side of it, for the people, and just for some perspective of those that don't know upstream oil and gas. These pumps are pumping extremely high pressure fluid, 10, 12, maybe 14,000 psi, enough to cause severe damage if something goes wrong mechanically. And at that time, it was kind of the industry was in the process of setting the rules so that people actually are not allowed to go in, even be in there while they're pumping. Tell us about the impact on safety. How has this affected your people and their ability to operate safely?
So, of all the things, of all the cultures or all the habits or all the SOPs that are the hardest to change inside a service company like ours or the oil field in general, is most of the people that work in our business are thought of being, the wildcatters or the outlaws or the people that are larger than life, that are, superhuman strength. And part of that, machismo that goes along with that had always bled over into the safety culture. And historically, we've hurt a lot of people in our business. And right about the time, about the 2008 through 2010, 12, and 13, we began to have this huge ramp up in the U.S. shale and U.S. shale production. There was kind of a spike of injuries and some fatalities and some really, really awful things that had happened. And we began to really apply a little bit more, I won't say more safety procedures, but we did it with a lot more vigor in terms of being able to try to engineer all the possible opportunities to hurt people out. We hadn't done that before. Over the history of my experience in the oil field, we'd hurt a lot of people for a lot of years, and we finally began to have to face the fact that safety was something that was not only was it real, but it was really the anchor that was going to keep us in one spot and not allow us to move into the future. And it became paramount for all companies, both the operator as well as oil field service providers. So I say all that to say this: we've eliminated in what we call our red zone, and that red zone encompasses the places that we use our sensor technologies currently today. It's on the back of the pumps where the high pressure, and our people no longer have to go in there to look or to verify or to listen, which was something that we used to do. So our safety record has gone from, the industry average is about 2.56 total recordable incident rates. And that incident rate is based on 100,000 man hours of work. And so on a normal year, we actually operate 7 million man hours. And so our total recordable incident rate since 2015 has hovered below the 0.45. And just the last 2 years in a row, we've gone to a 0.023. So our incident rate is almost approaching zero. And we are so proud of that.
Yeah. It's really unbelievable. The math on that, you're talking 100 times lower than the normal typical industry average. How much of that is, so you get, again, there's technology, there's people, and there's leadership. What is it that makes that happen? What is it that makes FTS achieve that and sustain it? You're talking for 2 years now being like well under point one.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. The first thing is you have to have great field supervision. It is the frontline supervisor's responsibility, his passion, his desire to make sure that everybody on location is safe. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we're absolutely relentless when it comes to finding ways to engineer out or find ways to eliminate the problem. We recognize that we work in an industry that is inherently dangerous. And the only way that we can guarantee, the old saying is the only way to get zero is to not work. I can guarantee you that I won't have any injuries or any incidents if I don't do any work. Well, that's not an option. So the next option is we have to be diligent, vigilant. We have to engineer ways around it, and we have to apply technology to it. And so those are the three things.
Yeah.
When we take a step back and you think about it, it's a massive undertaking, but when you're doing it every single day, it is almost the fiber of our being. It's a point in time, and it's a road that we've traveled, and it's not commonplace, but it's who we are. It's what we are.
Yeah. I have the privilege of seeing what happens in such a variety of industries, and really every customer we have, every company we work with takes safety very, very seriously. And for most, it's literally the top priority. Get the job done because you have to get a job done, otherwise you don't exist. But right with that is do it as safely as possible. Everybody gets home safe. However, right from the start, I mean, because of what you described, just the challenges of the oil field, to this day, there aren't other industries where every single meeting begins with a safety briefing and a reminder of what are the safety impacts. And on site, you don't get there unless you have the proper briefings. And I mean, everyone uses PPE, but it's at a whole elevated level, just in context. And it's really, remarkable. People think about, especially upstream oil and gas, as being kind of a wildcat or maverick, activity, which, is fair. I
Yeah,
think a lot
yeah,
of,
we are.
but you do it with this heightened attention to safety. It's almost like astronauts or something. You're doing or fighter pilots. Like you're doing such a dangerous thing that you have to take it extra seriously. And then when you do, what's remarkable is that your incident rate levels are far lower than they are in much more benign industries. It's just remarkable.
One of the last things I kind of want to brag a little bit about our South Texas district. They have gone 3 complete calendar years and over 3 million man hours worked with 0 incidents. And let me put that in context. That is a business that's made up of 400 Mavericks that work 12-hour shifts, that travel approximately 118 miles one way a day in a crew van, that work 14 days on and take 7 days off in the snow, not very much in South Texas. A little bit of rain, not very much. Lots and lots of heat, lots of adverse conditions, and they've managed to do it 3 years in a row without an incident. And that is remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. What I find so inspiring about it is that it's, just as we talked about with the, increasing the pump life and reducing the downtime, improving the safety, these same things are more achievable than I think most believe that they are for other, I think other industries can have as dramatic of improvements in their safety record, at least as much as it relates to their machinery and their culture of how they treat each other, how they treat things. So yeah, it's a great showcase of what's possible.
Can I tell a story that really kind of talks a little bit about I think some of the other issues that safety faces across our nation and across the world?
Please, that's what we're here for.
I wasn't present at this meeting, but my boss, my Halliburton boss, was there. He was in a meeting in Houston, and he had all of the region VPs, all of the executive VPs, and the COO. And he asked everybody in the place if they had any children that were of working age post college, for those people to stand up. And then he asked those that had children that were working age that weren't in college to stand up as well. And then he asked how many of those people, of those children that were working age, were currently working for Halliburton. And they all sat down. There was not one single executive in the organization that had a child that worked for Halliburton. And his response was, our organization, Earl P. Halliburton, built this on families, on brothers and fathers and sons working together in a place that they could make a tremendous income for their family. And yet you're telling me that based on safety and safety only is the reason that your children are not working for the company. And everybody in the room said yes. That was the moment inside the Halliburton organization where safety became a core competency. It became important to everyone. Once it hit that close to home to the executive, and it has to run from the top to the bottom, I cannot pay lip service about safety and then be on location and not practice it. So
that's remarkable. When was that? When did that happen?
It was late 2007.
Okay, around that same time where this inflection point we're talking about. Wow. If you look big picture, so you've talked about, I mean, you basically have talked about eliminating 75% of the non-productive time. Eliminating, I mean, basically nearly all of recordable safety incidents, increasing the equipment life by between 3 and 4 times, if I'm doing the math right.
You are.
How do you people always want to know economic impact, how do you answer that question if somebody says, how do you measure the impact of this economically?
Well, there's a couple of ways that I can answer it. I mean, the first is it's in the hundreds and millions of dollars of savings, right? I mean, that's that's the easy short math to do, and we can back that up a million ways. But one of the other things that I want to share with the audience as well is when we started the organization, the restructure, the remodel, the revamp, the regrowth prior to this relationship with KCF, we were burdened with a company that had 1.6 or 1.2 billion dollars worth of debt. Up until the middle of last summer, we were able to pay back through cash and free cash flow all but $500 million in net debt. During the course of that run up, during the course of that time in the market, we were able to IPO, and during that IPO, we took proceeds of $300 million. So if you just do the math on the back of the napkin and think about the hundreds of millions of dollars of impact that we were able to save and pay down debt, that's the most remarkable part of this KCF story, this KCF relationship, this transformation inside. What can be done? What are all the possibilities? Now there are some bumps along the way. There are some dollars and cents and value that go far beyond those numbers that someone else will achieve after I'm long gone and dead, based on what we were able to do here. But that's how we think about it inside the organization.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If I may, I mean, I'm really actually just genuinely interested to ask how you describe this, but so to go back to 2015, 2016, FTS was at kind of this time when those three ingredients were making, it the right time to change. But what if we didn't come along? Like what do you think is I don't know, special or was the enabler that you saw from my company that I don't know, fast track these things or helped you do it?
Well, the single biggest, well, it's hard to say single, Jeremy, because that would say that the KCF organization, I think three, again, here we're back to the three things again. You believed in your product probably more so than even I believed in it at the beginning. So let's start there. And when someone has that overwhelming conviction, and then you add a sales leader like you had with Ben, it creates its own wake. So let's start with that. So KCF in 2015 and 2016 believed without a shadow of a doubt that they could change my business and change the industry. Still believe that today, by the way. The second thing that happened is you had enough vision and enough foresight and enough belief in this relationship that you took a chance with a young engineer from Penn State and you put Blake in my office. Now, make no mistake, it could have been any of the 25 other young engineers that you had. But somehow, some way, Blake had the right chemistry and fell in line with myself and with Jamie, our operations manager at the time. And there was some level of dynamic chemistry that is almost unexplainable, but he believed in the product, he believed in our business, and we would continue to push one another from 6:30 in the morning until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, all day, every day, even on weekends, about what we could do, what we couldn't do. There was this level of excitement, this level of enthusiasm that he brought to the team and to the organization. And then the third piece of the puzzle is no matter what happened, no matter what the outcomes were, everybody inside the KCF organization was willing to move to the next step, fix it, change it, get new batteries, adapt, innovate, write new software, get new software, try to figure out how to make how to make my organization better through your own intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, it's a whole story of learning. I love that you identify the people, Blake and Ben, and I mean, there's so many others that we both know, but I think that's something that people in other industries miss is they think in some ways they're more sophisticated, at least in their engineering thinking or approach, that they miss out on the human element and therefore think that you can just sort of buy some sensors or buy some technology, buy an AI algorithm, and your problems will go away. When in fact, it's the people working together and learning together that actually makes the real dramatic change. I mean, that's what we've, I think, seen together.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And look, we all have friends in other industries that we go to at social gatherings, and we listen to their woes. And I've never been involved in one of those conversations where I didn't walk away shaking my head thinking, it's the people, dummy. It's the people. It's not the products. It's not it all comes down to the people element.
Yeah, and I think it will for a long time. I think the technology can enable great things, but if the people don't change, then it doesn't really make much difference. That's one of the biggest things I think I've learned in the last 10 years.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's one of the things that we need to talk about as we move into the segue about what's going to happen next. What's the future hold? What does it look like? What's going to happen inside our industry?
Yeah, that's exactly where I want to go. I want to talk about what's happening now from your point of view. What's happening next in because in addition, doing a lot of what we've talked about happened between 2016 and 2018 or 19. And having this operations center. We have companies today that talk about the hypothetical, having a centralized operations center where you have a team that's looking at all of your operations and equipment and making real-time decisions. And you and I both know you were doing that in 2018, but so much has happened since then and now. What can you share with us about what FTS is doing now and what you find most exciting?
Well, I am absolutely excited about automation. And we throw that term around all the time about automation. I mean, our the number one, the highest priority, the forefront of all of the meetings behind the safety component of our business is MIQ. And it's the machine learning that's going to get us that's going to provide my folks on location and my customers on location the ability to make a change with the equipment in milliseconds compared to minutes.
And let me just pause, Buddy. To MIQ for the listener it's a KCF software package called Machine IQ that monitors the health of machinery, provides predictive diagnostics and analytics in real time based on a whole body of work with machine learning and AI that's led to algorithms that are fielded today. That's what we're talking about.
And so those algorithms and all of that learning, we have been gathering and moving towards from the very beginning. It didn't take very long. I would love to tell the story that I was able to see, this digitalization, this automation from the very beginning, from the moment I sat in the EQT office, but I didn't see it at the time. But it didn't take very much longer once we recognized what all these signatures and what giving all of our equipment a voice would do in the long term. So let's fast forward 5 years to currently where we are today, as we think about what this automation is going to wind up doing and what we call the load balancing. And really for the listeners, you've heard me talk about we've moved the needle from efficiency. We've eliminated 75% of non-productive time from before. Well, the next big step is to be able to make changes on location real time to move it from minutes to milliseconds. That's not going to push the needle because we're all bound by time and space. This 24-hour, we haven't figured out a way to engineer around the 24-hour time clock, but that's really what we're up against. We don't believe that this automation piece is going to move us that much more efficient as it relates to time. But what it will do is it will free up so many more resources, brain power on location that normally we're focused in on taking care of changing pumps, moving gears, switching gears, any part of the system that hasn't been automated. And it'll allow them to evaluate the job and evaluate what's really going on, the health of the equipment, real time with the data, while this is doing the monitoring piece of the rate and pressure.
So it frees up those resources. And what's the implication then? What is it? So actually, I'll ask you two questions together. What's the implication? And then with that, how close are we? So you keep moving the bar on your ideal,
The ideal and moving the goalposts with this MIQ piece, we are currently testing it right now, and we have huge positive results. So what I will tell you is, in a 9-inning baseball game, we're past the seventh inning stretch. I'm bringing in the left-hander. He's going to come in and close, and we should be, we're moving at a pace rapidly to get us And this will move us ahead of every single other company in our space, probably by at least 2, if not 3 years ahead of everybody else. Number one. And number two, the implications are those other people that we have on location, much like the NOC center, where they're evaluating multiple frac crews are being monitored by one engineer or one service supervisor, looking at machine health, looking at some of the KPIs and the real-time data that's coming in. We'll again now be able to free up some more resources on location. It will almost make the supervision or the use of the assets on location. We'll be able to do more, operate more than one location remotely from the NOC through this load balancing equation, which is huge. I mean, right now, if you think about a current crew, a current shift that I talked about before is made up of 13 EOs, one van lead, and one service supervisor. So it's made up of a total of 15. What we could wind up doing is we could take that 15 and convert. We could double. We could effectively double the size of our scope and reach with half of the people that we currently have today, which is just fantastic. When you take a look at it from the field perspective, they're a little bit concerned that we're, going to eventually get into some sort of automation and artificial intelligence, and that they'll no longer have a job. But the way we view it is it gives them more job security, because now the people that we have, the people that we continue to train, the people that we have on the bench that are able to develop new skills will only enhance our great company. It won't hurt it. We won't lose any people. We'll just be able to redeploy them into things that they were skilled and gifted to do, outside of sitting in a van trying to operate, trying to decide whether or not station number 14 needs to go to another gear and more RPMs, when the computer can do that faster, quicker, easier, and cleaner, and no emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, buddy. I see that dynamic. It's such a fascinating dynamic of this whole industrial transformation that we, you from the worker side of things, not so much from the company and the leadership, but people think that the technology is going to change their job or take their job, or they, cause companies to downsize. But the overarching message or the story is just such the opposite. It's exactly what you described. We see it all the time. It just, like, what people I think don't realize until they see it is that nobody benefits when a pump blows up. Nobody benefits from doing a dangerous job that causes a problem. And so when you can leverage technology to solve the problems, what happens is the people all elevate their skill set and they become more productive and more focused and safer. And that's what makes it so fun. You see the teams, and I mean, you've seen this so much more than I have because you've actually done it. You've led it. Isn't it fun when you see people like truly embracing the technology and just elevating what they do and the way they see themselves?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean, if you as a leader or a manager in any company, in any part of this industrial transformation, and you're not absolutely geeked about watching your people get better, I, look, I think you need to check out and go do something else. The technology application gives you the ability to free and release the actual potential of all of the people that you have working for you. And if you can't get excited about that, then it's just another, meeting brief. It's just another dashboard that you have to look at. It's just another piece of technology that you either have to do some ROI calculation for, that becomes some sort of financial metric that's on your scorecard that you think about on a quarterly basis for the board and the board deck and the stock market. And, what a travesty that all is. Because the value and the beauty is harnessing the intellect of people that can help grow. All the great ideas come from the people that are swinging the hammer and doing the work. They never come from all of us that sit in the corner office. The one thing that I love to say the most, and I believe, and I'll shout it till I die, when I sit in my office in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, I cannot see one single frac location, one single wellhead here. Therefore, I am exponentially dumber the more I sit here, the further away I am from the wellhead, because all of the lessons learned happen there. Whether that's on the manufacturing floor, whether that's on location, whether that's sitting on a CNC machine running a lathe, I mean, any of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when there's just such a convergence with some of the best run manufacturing companies, you're like the lean companies, like Toyota being probably the most notable. It's so philosophically aligned with the way they see it, going to the Gemba, being at the front lines, because that's where the innovation comes from. What I think people are realizing, I mean, not, I guess about 8% of people are realizing that that's exactly what happens is you elevate because you're connecting those dots. The people who are out experiencing and learning and noticing things are able to actually internalize and connect the dots and do something with it because they're not just trying to stay safe and put out fires and explosions and unexpected failures of machinery. So can I come back to that? There's a question I wanted to ask you, and we've covered a lot here. This is just I just so appreciate having this conversation with you. You talked about being a 2-3 years ahead of other companies that are trying to do some of these same things. Can you just talk kind of there's two levels that are really, I think, interesting to me, certainly. The rest of oil and gas, the whole oil and gas industry, which is undergoing a whole lot of change in addition to this digital transformation, industrial transformation. And then secondarily, all of just industry, manufacturing and power generation and other industrial operations. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the implications will be when the light bulb goes off, as it did for you in 2016, and companies undergo this change?
Sure. So let's take the first piece. When I say the 2 or 3 year head start, I guess I got to build a little context on the back of that. Early on, I said we had the opportunity of building on the backs of giants. We had a great company to start with, a great organization to build from and to move towards. Also, inside that whole sentence, inside that whole paragraph, inside this whole organization, we've had a mountain of debt that we had to repay and try to live through and understand and grow. And during the course of that time, our only goal that we could possibly even think about doing was to take care of that debt service. As we've gone through taking care of that debt service, we've been able to partner on the KCF piece, realizing the savings and all the things that I talked about before, our ability to pay back all of that additional money. Well, during the course of that time, one of the things that we have suffered from as an organization is the notion that we have not invested in what the industry would say is technology, which I think is absolutely remarkable because people are spending additional money on things that really won't make a significant impact. And I don't mean that to be negative, and I don't mean that to be a naysayer, but people are talking about investing in, in enhancing, their software, their software platforms, doing some of the things that I would call ancillary services or ancillary platforms around, their core competency of pressure pumping. Whereas we've done nothing more than pay back debt and give our equipment a voice so that we can continue to save, cut cost, be safer, be more efficient, and move forward. And so with kind of that as the context behind, without bashing the rest of the industry, what I'm anxious for is once MIQ becomes commonplace, once MIQ, I install it in all of my locations, once we get to the full automation piece, all of a sudden, all of those sleeping giants, all those people that were looking over their shoulder and down their nose at our ability to continue to not invest in the things that the talking heads thought were important, we will be able to have a coming out party that will change both our customers' view as well as our competitors' view. It will give us a chance to showcase our people. It'll give us a chance to showcase the technology that we can do it safer, we can do it faster, we can do it cleaner, we can do it more efficient with less people and brighter people. And the customer will be the beneficiary as opposed to investing in technology that we don't know is going to come to fruition for a couple of years. So I'll put a comma there and pause at that. So that's kind of the driving force behind our coming out party with MIQ. The other piece that's going on inside our business today, and most of us know, is we continue to keep talking about the ESG initiative, or if those that aren't familiar with the ESG initiative, it's the environmental sustainability, trying to move away from our carbon footprint, trying to move away from greenhouse gases, leaning towards electric power, electric cars, wind generation, solar generation, all things energy and all things affordable energy. And most of our business has been moving towards what we consider to be electric fleets. The electric fleets kind of fulfill two parts of the ESG initiative. Number one, it allows you to say that your carbon footprint is smaller because you're not burning diesel, you'll be burning natural gas and generating electricity to go ahead and move towards that. So that's a technology piece that they've pushed forward. However, the one thing that's super interesting and that we're awful proud of is because we've invested in the KCF technology and moving full towards automation, while some of the others have spent R&D money trying to reinvent electric generation through turbine power. This technology will be applicable once there is a better solution for electric frac fleets or biofuel frac fleets or any of the next power generation that we move to. The fundamental piece, the technology that we've invested in, allows us to showcase this platform regardless of what the environmental and the ESG energy portion becomes.
Yeah. It relates to something we see in so many industries, a very important change, like a change to the way that the whole industry is powered. The actual damage that happens to the pumps has nothing to do with what's driving it, whether it's an electric motor or a diesel engine or a windmill, hypothetically. The what actually happens is in the nitty gritty of the pump itself, of the machinery. And it's so chronic in so many other industries. Technology development is often not very well aligned with the actual operational needs. The pattern I see is that the majority of the operational problems are just right under our noses. It's just the stuff that you're working with every day. There are things that can be improved that are just different than the status quo that we're used to, and that's what I think that FTS has done so remarkably, is you focused on the thing that's actually changing. So, we've been talking for a while. I want to ask, just kind of open-ended, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to spend some time on and share?
Yeah, I think I'd like to take a walk down memory lane just to kind of let the audience understand what this relationship has really been like. And I think what is possible, not just inside upstream oil and gas, but across the entire manufacturing process or across the entire nation, to be honest. If you haven't had an opportunity to engage with the KCF team at a level other than just kind of a superficial, maybe trade a few emails or listen to a presentation, I think you're missing out on a really unique opportunity. And hopefully this won't make you blush too much, Jeremy. But the challenge really is, in my career, I'm an old gray-haired guy. I've been in the business a long time, and I can't think of one single relationship, business or otherwise, that has challenged me more intellectually, challenged me more personally, financially, has provided this much encouragement, this much belief in a product, in an industry, in America. And I don't mean to sound trite. I don't want it to sound gushy, but what KCF has managed to do for FTS is provide a partnership that is real and authentic. We've saved a tremendous amount of money. We've advanced the technology. We've grown our people. We've shared in the struggles. We've shared in the challenges. But at every turn, KCF has always been there. KCF has always led the way. They've always challenged and pushed forward. And look, I can't speak highly enough about on what you guys have done for me personally, as well as for our organization collectively, the industry, as well as, look, America. I mean, you guys have made a gigantic step change for us, which has impacted the price of oil, impacted all the things that go along with that. So number one, I want to say thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, buddy, and it doesn't make me blush, but it does bring tears to my eyes because I'm so proud of it. I'm just so proud of what's been accomplished, and it's your accomplishments, but just the way you described our role in it just makes me really proud.
You should be. You absolutely should be. Kind of one of the other things that I wanted to also hit on. And I've had the unique pleasure of going to some other places and seeing some other manufacturing processes. I've gone and had the opportunity to be involved in some of the construction industry, and I've got friends and mentors in other parts of the business. I've yet to see any business that couldn't benefit from the sensor technology. If you have anything that moves, there's value. And even if you don't have anything that moves, there's also value in the fact that the way KCF thinks about the future, the way they think about current business, the way they think about automation, the way they think about some of the things that I don't even understand and can't comprehend. But the value goes far beyond just the sensor technology. You can buy sensors anywhere. I think you can buy, algorithms. I mean, you can do your Google search and come up with a million other reasons why you should find the low cost leader and maybe the other vendors and some of the other things that go along with it. But the challenge is, if you don't engage in someone who is, I guess to say it best, KCF wants their partners to succeed. And if you don't engage in that, you are missing out.
That is exactly how we see it. Yeah, I don't think I could say it as well as you. I know I couldn't. I mean, I think that's maybe a good place to stop, buddies. That really sums it all up, because it's all about it's not about the technology. It's about making American industry better, safer, more productive, more powerful. And and I'll reflect it back to you because what you've accomplished over these last 5 years is just it's remarkable. It's a reason for that 92% rate of failing to achieve game-changing results, even out of the 8%. I don't know a company that would even contemplate that it's possible to achieve what you have achieved in the numbers you were talking about earlier. And I think so much of that goes to FTS, but to you personally, because it's the things you've done to lead the people and to convince them, to motivate them, to pay attention to something that they didn't used to think was important, and to create believers out of people. That's what really makes it click. And it's been a remarkable ride, and I thank you for that.
You are so welcome.
Great. Well, I think we should wrap there. This is the Industrial Transformation Podcast. I'm Jeremy Frank, and I've had the pleasure of speaking today with Buddy Petersen, Chief Operating Officer of FTS International. Thanks, Buddy.
Thank you.